In the news as of late because you're asking some, inconvenient questions of the administration. Congressman McCaul, welcome to the Voice of Texas.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ed.
It's a pleasure, sir. I saw you on Fox and Friends. You just asked some specific questions. Why were the obvious warnings, the requests for additional security at the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi, Libya, why were they ignored?
Yeah, and I asked Secretary Clinton the last time she testified before Congress these questions. We had 4 cables coming out of the embassy in Tripoli about Benghazi, specifically about the lack of security and requests for additional security. And all 4 requests were denied. The last one came about 2 weeks before the September 11th attack. An emergency cable from the ambassador, a cry for help, basically saying, please give us more security here. There are al-Qaeda operatives all over this place. And when I asked her about it, she said, well, I don't see all the cables that come in. I mean, this is from the ambassador, out of one of the most dangerous outposts that we have. And it was ignored, and we know what happened. We had an ambassador killed and 3 other, 2 foreign service and 1 Navy SEAL that day. And I don't know if you saw the 60 Minutes special, but it was actually quite chilling. As they described when they got there, the flags of al-Qaeda being flown all over the place. And clearly the cables talked about the al-Qaeda threat. What's interesting is that after the attack in Benghazi, it was blamed on some video out of Florida. And that's the most unconscionable thing. And to this day, you saw the State Department spokeswoman who would not even use the word al-Qaeda in her press conference.
So we're 14 months after this horrific incident. The warnings were 15 to 16 months past the original initial warnings. The request by the U.S. ambassador, who said, I need more security, and continued to plead for it literally up until the time that the attacks began, which led to his murder. And we still, 14 months after this event, have not had a decent briefing by the State Department or an admission of any responsibility whatsoever by this administration. None.
None, and they don't. The role of this administration is to downplay these events and not call them what they are, and they're acts of terrorism. They don't like to use the word al-Qaeda. It's almost as if they want to wish this threat away. And let me tell you, Ed, I get these briefings, and the threat's not pre-9/11. It's not less. It's actually getting worse. And Northern Africa is, al-Qaeda is like a wildfire. I mean, this stuff is spreading, and as it spreads there, the threat to the homeland increases. And so, my position, that's what I'm most concerned about. And we asked the State Department. I sent a letter to them. I had the chairman of Foreign Affairs join me to ask why haven't they put these guys on the most wanted list, which is Rewards for Justice program, which actually brought Ramzi Youssef, the World Trade Center bomber of 1993, in, and Saddam Hussein's brothers. And this has been a very successful counterterrorism tool, and yet they won't even put. There are 13 sealed indictments out there, but they won't put these individuals on this most wanted list at the State Department. It's unconscionable. So I've got about 50 members and growing, asking State Department to do that.
So basically, the State Department runs a wanted poster. I mean, back to the days of the Westerns, the wanted poster, and the picture went up, and you reward, dead or alive. And here are the guys that the president assured us the next day or the days following Benghazi, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to bring these people to justice. We won't rest. Well, apparently he's got time to play golf because they still haven't posted the reward for these folks. And as we remember, about 6 months ago, CNN went stomping around Benghazi and actually went to a coffee shop at the main hotel and found the guy that the U.S. had said was their main suspect. And he said, nobody's ever come and asked me a question. Not a single American showed up over here and wants to talk to me.
They have no interest in capturing these guys. And they're the priority. If it was a priority, as it should be, they would put them on the most wanted list, and they haven't done that. And the idea that a CNN reporter could sit down and have a tea or coffee in a coffee shop with the guy that led the attack is, you and I are almost laughing about this, but it's really sad. And tragic to the victims. I mean, you've got a dead U.S. ambassador, a Navy SEAL, 2 foreign service officers that were CIA operatives, dead. And the families want justice here, and this administration has no interest in it. And It really angers me. And you know, we're continuing to prod this. I still am arguing for the select committee. I think the speaker has made a bad decision in not appointing a select committee on this to ratchet up the pressure. Because I think this goes not only to Secretary Clinton, that's going to haunt her in the presidential race, but, you know, the idea that stand-down orders are given to the military not to go in to try to save our ambassador. You know, no man left behind is what the military teaches, and we left him behind there.
Yeah, consciously from the top levels, it appears. Congressman Michael McCaul has joined us this morning from Washington, D.C., and for our listeners, the congressman is the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, which means, and I never want you to ever answer or be asked to answer a question that is within, you know, outside of your ability to speak about it publicly, but you receive classified briefings about the threat on Homeland Security in this country, which is why you have a passionate interest in not only protecting our homeland, your district, but the entire country. With that to be said, sir, if I come to the conclusion, and again, I haven't spoken to you about this, but if I as a taxpayer, as a citizen, come to the conclusion that what happened in Benghazi is being covered up by this administration for one of two reasons, or a combination thereof. One, politically, this administration does not want to recognize the threat of terrorism because they believe that they are weak on that issue. And two, there may have been CIA activity, including gun running, perhaps going to Syria, that went on that night. And I come to the conclusion this administration is stonewalling this issue because of that. What would you say to me?
Well, you know, I'm actually getting briefed at 9 o'clock on matters, threat briefing. And I think on the first one, you're absolutely right. It's a political narrative to say that the war is over. They want to wish this thing away, and the threat's getting greater, not less. You know, Fort Hood was, you know, a workplace violence, accident to them. You know, Benghazi was blamed on a video, not an act of terrorism. It's a repetitive narrative that is disturbing because it doesn't acknowledge reality. The second is a theory, and it's a theory that I share with you, is that I asked the question, why was our ambassador in Benghazi, of all places, on 9/11, when the Red Cross had been hit, when the British ambassador, they tried to kill him, when they threw an IED at the consulate in Benghazi and blew a hole in the wall, and the threat, you know, warnings were out there, and the cables went out for more security. What was he doing there? We know that he met with the Turkish ambassador that very day on 9/11 prior to his death. And what was he meeting with him about? I know there are a lot of weapons that were recovered in Libya, man-pads and other things. We know that this administration has been actively trying to support these rebel forces in Syria. And you and I have talked about this. I was very much against us getting involved in that, primarily because the idea we're going to support rebel forces that we know are 50% infiltrated and hijacked by al-Qaeda-like factions really defies, you know, they're the enemy. Why are we supporting them? And so it is possible, and I can't confirm this, you know, with you in the radio show, that possibly they're trying to work out a way to get arms out of Libya to Turkey and then into Syria to fund these rebel forces. I'm actively investigating this issue, you know, as we speak, because I think the American people need to know why was our ambassador there on September the 11th, knowing the security threat and the risks.
And why and you would know this better than I, but it seems to be, when I hear about CIA members running around the compound, that, you know, that literally there were stacks of weapons that were there, that's not the usual activity that goes on in a U.S. embassy in a non-capital environment. Again, that's not the capital of Libya. And furthermore, it is my assumption from just reading the news and observing this that having, you know, former Navy SEALs on rooftops that are private contractors is not the usual thing that you have in embassies either. Doesn't this seem like something else is going on there, and is this perhaps what the cover-up is about?
Well, you know, possibly. And remember, though, because of the security risk is so great, that I think that's why you're seeing this added effort by the SEALs who were there to protect it. Most embassies have a CIA presence, and when we get embassies, we get briefed by the chief of the station. They call them the CIA operatives. But, you know, there was a CIA annex at this facility that got overrun by these Al-Qaeda. And it was Al-Qaeda. I mean, made no mistake, this al-Libby guy that we captured was behind this, and we know that there are others. One guy released from Guantanamo Bay was involved in this. I mean, everybody wants to shut down Guantanamo and let them all go. I mean, these guys go back and they kill Americans. That's what they like to do. Again, it's a probing question that I think you're on to something that I have been investigating and will continue to do so to find out why was he there on all day September the 11th at that compound with the Turkish ambassador. I think it is very likely that that's probably what was going on. And
something else.
The whole idea of us covertly arming the rebel forces is a whole other issue that I think needs to be exposed, because I don't think the American taxpayer realizes that we're arming and funding Al-Qaeda factions in Syria.
Well, that was the basis for the scandal that rocked the Reagan administration, the Iran-Contra, and I don't see a great deal of difference between this and that, other than, they may or may not have been selling things for private funding for it, but the concept is the same. You've got this shadow government potentially picking winners and losers in civil wars without any due process or oversight from the legislative branch.
And I think it's worse. I mean, and I mentioned that, the Iran-Contra was such a big scandal, but this is even worse, because I thought Al-Qaeda was the enemy. I thought Al-Qaeda was the force that brought down the World Trade Center. Al-Qaeda, has been our enemy in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and, their presence is growing over there. It's not diminishing. And so the idea that we're going to arm and fund them in Syria, it only blows back on us every time we do something like this. Mm-hmm. It always turns back against us. So if we arm the jihadists in Syria and they get hold of those chemical weapons, and then they point those, and Assad, as bad as he is not going to use those. This is the Iranian puppet in Syria. As bad as he is, he's never threatened to use those against the West and against the United States. But these jihadists, if they get in control of these chemical weapons, you can bet that they're going to turn those against Americans.
Congressman Michael McCaul joining us from Washington, D.C. You're the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, and you've been asking publicly, writing letters, and demanding answers on this. And I hope, sir, that the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, will see the failure of this administration to answer these questions and then take whatever steps necessary to get the answers. Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks, Ed. I appreciate it.
Take care, sir. Congressman Michael McCaul joining us from Washington.